Good morning, everyone. I'm Medha Basu, GovInsider's Deputy Editor. Welcome to Day 2 of the GovInsider Live Festival of Innovation. We start today with a conversation on how data has helped nations adapt to COVID-19 and the big trends that will take us forward. First, we turn to healthcare. The moment a patient reports sick at a clinic, Singapore begins consolidating data to estimate their likelihood of testing positive for COVID-19. From testing and tracing to isolation, data has underpinned Singapore's response to the pandemic. Much of this work has been led by the health tech agency IHiS. I'm pleased to welcome Chua Yong, Head of Emerging Services and Capabilities, to tell us more. Over to you, Sheong.
All right, maybe I'll just do a short presentation of roughly about 10 minutes, just maybe give a glimpse of what we did, how we use data in support of the COVID-19 exercise. Is that okay we start?
Absolutely, go for it.
Sure, thanks, yeah. So I head up the Emerging Services and Capability groups within the IHiS group, in short IHiS. Essentially, we are the health tech agency for the whole government of Singapore. Health tech. This is where we support some of the digitization effort, connecting all the systems together, and then helping to analyze how we use the data to help support the Singapore healthcare ecosystem. And we serve a very, very large ecosystem of about 5.6 million population, roughly about 1 million active patients that consume services from our healthcare systems, serving about 40 plus different hospitals, clinics across the island, roughly having a range of about 14 million patients attendance annually, roughly about 500,000 inpatient admissions on an annual basis. And together with our 50,000 over professionals supporting the healthcare system, we also have partnership with various private specialists and GP clinics in the island, roughly 1,005 of them, and then powered by about 2,700 IT professionals and support staff enabling the IT systems behind the scenes, supporting all the stakeholders. And a lot of times we are guided by what we call our Health IT Master Plan. We are currently in version 2.0, and this is I'll share a little bit more in details later on. Right, this is a spectrum of what our stakeholder looks like. For those who are not familiar with the healthcare system of Singapore, spanning from preventive care to primary care, acute, and all the way to social and community care in the community. So roughly about 5.6 million consumers in 1 million homes across Singapore, 20 public subsidized polyclinics that delivers screening to immunization, acute care, cough and cold, chronic care management services to our patients in subsidized clinics across the island. And then in partnership with various GP clinics across the island that make care accessible for our patients across the island. Across the various settings, we have in the acute space, we have roughly about 10,000 beds capacity across the island, in partnership with some of the acute hospitals that are privately run at the bottom of the screen, and essentially looking at some of the transition of care into the community through roughly about 4 to 10 to about 100 volunteer welfare organization executed and operated intermediate and long-term care facilities. All right, last but not least, is really about the social sector, and it's an important component of our care because when a patient leaves the hospital, there's a need to continue that care in the community, and making sure that our patients are well taken care of before they comes back to the acute hospitals. All right, so in essence, this is how we manage our healthcare facilities across Singapore. And we digitize, connect, and analyze all the data that comes and flows through the systems. And hopefully we can do a better job in anticipating needs and looking at how we could manage the patients out in the community and in a more coordinated fashion. All right. During peacetime, we use data in various ways. One is to improve clinical outcome. The other four is really about increasing productivity of our healthcare workers. It spans from operational needs using data for contact tracing in the COVID environment. We use RPA, robotic process automations, to to deal with automating some of the finance functions for claims. We use data analytics to support some of the losartan drug recall, if you can remember 2 years ago. And we also use AI, to leverage AI to predict some of these multi-admissions that potentially might hit some of our patients so that we can proactively reach out to them before they leave the hospital. And some of the administrative needs, use of AI is really about simple things like even predicting who is not going to show up in our clinic, so we can optimize the slots and the appointment slots for our clinics to further optimize the use of our valuable resources in our hospitals and clinics, right? Last but not least, it's really also about how we serve our seniors better. So we actually collect data, we use that data to analyze their needs so that I can anticipate some of the demands that's coming to our healthcare services, right? Next, I think during the COVID period, we pivoted from some of the existing capabilities that we had and created new ones, right? So on the screen, you can see probably some of the data, the use of data across different spectrum. One is in the contact tracing. We actually trace the use of the contact details between different individuals, hopefully to identify clusters of COVID patients in the community. That is also widely used in our care facilities. We actually pivoted some existing vital signs monitoring solutions, deploying kits for patients to monitor themselves during the COVID period, where they are isolated in some of these care facilities. We actually pivoted very quickly from a kiosk mode to a telehealth on wheels to enable our healthcare professionals and IT professionals to actually wheel in all these equipments without crossing the red zone and minimize the risks of contacting the disease. All right. And in the recent times, we also have integrated some of our existing solution where we call iConnect.dom, where we use some of these digital solutions to deploy into the dormitories for healthcare workers to do surveillance, to collect data for surveillance, use them for them to seek help and acute care when they need to reach out to telehealth providers out in the private sectors for them to consult with doctors when they have acute pains or chronic conditions. Right. Next, please. All right. So these are some examples of how we have used data at scale. Some of the pilot systems were actually expedited into operational use. So one classic example is the command control systems that we have deployed at Tan Tock Seng NCID clinic for us to visualize how the hospital ground ops actually keep tracks of critical resources like PPE, masks, gloves, and beds, and how patients flow in and out of the hospitals, and having the ability to predict some of this patient load and anticipate some of this patient load, right? And using some of the AI components to see whether we could predict and check those X-rays to see whether the community-acquired pneumonia cases can be picked up from the X-rays that we picked up from the radiology department. Next, please. Yeah. All right. And last, probably leave a parting note here while we start this panel discussion is we do see a new norms emerging that requires a new capability to support the healthcare systems, mainly in the four main areas. One is really about minimizing physical contact. So we are starting to see more and more of such implication, both in the inpatient care and the community care. Patients are expecting some of this remote care to be available or made available to them in short notice. And there's also significant implication in terms of how we train our clinical staff, how we support some of this care to happen in a remote, using remote care. The two areas in the center is really looking at how we actually support patients seeking care from the comfort of their homes to minimize contact with potential COVID patients. All right, the onsets of teleconsultation, telemonitoring at home, sending their vitals to the care providers, and having some tele support where allied health professionals needs to either connect with the patients, to engage with them, to care for their individuals' mental well-being or their chronic condition. All right. Similarly, on the provider end, there's also a similar need and request to say, hey, could I keep myself safe and my family safe by working from home and providing those cares from home? All right. So there are limitations in terms of how we do physical examination remotely. So that's an area that is emerging very quickly. and that requires us to bridge the gap between the ability to do teleconsults effectively and the ability for different providers to collaborate among themselves to provide a team-based care to our patients. And obviously, there's also an element of AI coming in to see whether we could augment some of the decision-making process, because as our healthcare providers are scattered across different parts of the islands, we actually need to connect with different specialists and expertise across the healthcare system to administer care to individual patients. Last but not least is this area really about getting ourselves better prepared for the next wave of infection and potentially even the next pandemic that's going to come along our way. So maybe that set the stage for our panel discussion going forward. Over to you.
Fantastic, Sheong. Thank you for those fascinating insights. Up next, we have Gemma van Halderen, Director of the Statistics Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Welcome, Gemma. Over to you.
Welcome. Thank you very much. It's very lovely to be with you here today, and thank you very much to GovInsider and also to Cloudera for this opportunity to be with you and to be part of this week of a Festival of Innovation. What a wonderful idea to have a week-long festival. I'll just flip over to my slides, very nice to be with you. So I'm going to talk about some data and transformations from the Asia and the Pacific statistical community. And just to set the scene, the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific is an extremely heterogeneous region of 4.6 billion people, 17 megacities, 2 oceans, and 58 countries based in our region. And I've shown there on the slide the diversity of our region. So the Regional Commission, the Economic SCAP, we are responsible for member states as far to the west as Russia, China, all the way over to the Pacific, down to Australia and New Zealand, as well as the ASEAN countries here in Southeast Asia. For a lot of our region, digital connectivity is poor. And so, for instance, out in the Pacific Islands, connections and the internet, digital connectivity is poor. Digital literacy is also an issue for our region. And as we've just seen this week with the typhoon in Japan and South Korea, we're also disaster prone. So it's quite an important and interesting region to work in to support the Asia Pacific statistical community. To give you an insight as to what I mean by the statistical community, I'm part of the public sector working on official statistics. So here on the screen is the homepage of Statistics Singapore, the Department of Statistics Singapore, which is the official statistics office of Singapore. And as you can see, this statistical offices around the Asia and the Pacific, we provide a lot of services. So we provide access to data, we provide publications, services and tools in a diverse range of areas. Here along the bottom of the screen for Statistics Singapore, you'll see we have access to data on national figures, manufacturing sector, services sector, trade sector, prices such as the Consumer Price Index, as well as population estimates. So we offer a very diverse service to the public sector, to the public, and to business. And one of the very exciting features of Statistics Singapore is that it's #1 in the world in terms of openness for its data. So here we have worldwide, the Open Data Watch prepare an open data index that looks at the openness of data as well as the coverage of data. And Statistics Singapore is #1 of 178 countries that are measured across the world for its Open Data Index score. So congratulations for Singapore for setting such a good standard for the rest of the world. So turning now to COVID-19, it truly is transforming statistical operations of the statistical officers around the region as well as globally. And I'm just going to share with you now a couple of examples that have come up recently in our work. The first one I'd like to share with you is from BPS Indonesia, the Statistics Office of Indonesia. And COVID-19, this slide here was shared recently at a Big Data for Official Statistics conference that was held last week, hosted by the Republic of Korea. And BPS Indonesia highlighted that COVID-19 has affected many aspects of its operations. On the left-hand side of the screen there, you'll see that COVID-19 has impacted its 2020 Census of Population and Housing. The census is conducted once every 10 years and was underway or had just commenced when the COVID pandemic impacted operations. So the BPS Indonesia had to make some fairly major changes to how they were going to conduct their 2020 population census in many different business processes. So COVID-19 required some agility, responsiveness, flexibility to their major collection. On the right-hand side, BPS introduced two new initiatives. The first one was they undertook online surveys of the socioeconomic demographic survey of the COVID impact, as well as a survey of the COVID-19 impact on business sector. So they undertook a COVID-19 survey impact of the household sector, as well as the business sector. Now, this was really important for informing government decisions, informing the business sector, informing the public of the impact of COVID-19. And on the very far right side of this screen, BPS Indonesia have been really leading many statistical officers about trying to use big data for producing their official statistics. And here BPS listed 7 opportunities for the use of big data for informing on the impact of COVID-19. The use of a Google mobility index, using e-commerce data for online marketplace, a flight tracker, accommodation data, job vacancies, mobile phone data, and the use of satellite images. So here the impact of COVID-19 has not only impacted traditional survey operations, as I showed on the left-hand side of the screen, but also it's given an opportunity for BPS Indonesia to innovate with new surveys, new online surveys, but also innovate with the use of big data for official statistics. The second example I'd like to share with you is from Statistics New Zealand. And Statistics New Zealand, in response to COVID-19, has set up this new data portal. And this data portal is, as you see on the bottom of this screen, it's labelled experimental because it's got in there features that are making use of new data sources, new methods, new approaches to bring access to a wide variety of data on COVID-19. And this data portal was developed by Statistics New Zealand. It reports on the changing state of the aspects of New Zealand's economy since the COVID-19 outbreak. But importantly, it's using data not just from Statistics New Zealand, but from a range of other government organisations, including the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, Treasury, Ministry of Social Development, banks, and international sources. So this data portal is bringing together the entire ecosystem of data, not just in New Zealand, but international sources that have data about New Zealand. So this is a really important innovation that COVID-19 has enabled. And to give you one example of the data that's in this data portal, this data here is weekly economic sentiment data. And the data portal lets you go and explore economic data, health data, or social data. And you can do drill down boxes there, or type of data to select the category, select the indicator. In this case, this is economic sentiment, and then select the series. It also, along the bottom of the screen there, lets you change the different time periods that you might be interested. So this is a really important tool for decision makers, whether they're in government, whether they're in the public sector, or whether they're in private sector, or whether they're the public themselves, to understand the weekly sentiments, access to a whole range of other data as well. Now, this innovation from New Zealand also is bringing here weekly economic sentiment data. So often official statisticians produce data at a variety of timescales. Our population census data, for instance, is every 10 years. Often our prices data is quarterly, our jobs data may be monthly. But in this example, we have weekly economic sentiment. So this is an example of COVID-19 providing the opportunity for the statistical community to get closer and closer to real-time data. Again, this presentation, if you're interested, is available from the Big Data for Official Statistics website, and I've given you a source along the bottom of the screen there. So I've shared with you 2 examples from our region, well, actually 3 examples, Statistics Singapore, Statistics New Zealand, and BPS Indonesia. Here at SCAP, what we've done is we've produced this tool on our website, which is called a policy tracker. And this policy tracker has a variety of options. On the left-hand side, it shows you the different policies that we're currently providing and convening a knowledge hub about: containment measures, fiscal policies, monetary policies, small and medium enterprises, trade measures, transport measures, social protection measures. And importantly, of most interest to myself in this session today, is statistical measures that are underway in Asia and the Pacific. And if you go to this policy response tracker and click on the statistics tab, you'll come up with a screen that looks a little bit like this. And what this tab is showing is for the countries in our region, or that are member states of SCAP, it presents information on 3 different aspects. The first column there with the green buttons is showing whether there is a COVID-19 related response on the website of the National Statistical Office. The second column is showing you whether that statistical office has undertaken a socioeconomic response survey of the business sector. And the last column is showing whether it's undertaken a socioeconomic response survey of the household sector. Now, this website is constantly being updated, and you'll notice that I've just shared with you developments in Indonesia. We are yet to add Indonesia to this table, but we're constantly updating this table, because often one of the questions we've been asked is, what's happening in Asia and the Pacific? Where can I get information about the socioeconomic impact or the impact on the business sector? And so this policy response tracker under the statistics tab is like a knowledge hub where you can go and find out what's happening in our region and which national statistics officers are responding to COVID, either by providing extra information on their website or undertaking statistical surveys. So in conclusion, it was really nice to be with you here today. I have behind me some pictures of one of the other services that the statistical community undertake in Asia and Pacific, which is really important around civil registration and vital statistics. And linking back to our previous speaker, this is where civil registrations not only record births of people, but also deaths and marriage and other vital events. And I think this, combined with the civil registration, the other important function that statistical officers undertake is the population census. And so I'd like to just end with a reminder that the Census of Population 2020 in Singapore is currently underway. Your response does matter, and please do get behind the census in Singapore. This is an important data source for the next 10 years, and we really do count on you to help shape your future there in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gemma. Those were fantastic case studies, and that was crucial work that UNSCAP is supporting across the region. And now we're going to look at energy. Even as we battle the pandemic, the devastating impact of climate change looms overhead. Singapore is leading the way in using AI and data to drive greater sustainability in its energy use. It's a pleasure to introduce Chang Sheong, CEO of SP Digital, the energy tech unit of SP Group. Over to you, Sheong.
Hi, morning everyone. Thanks, Medha, for the introduction. Let me just share the slides that I prepared for this. All right. So thanks again for having me, GovInsider and Cloudera. Thanks for the invitation. I'd like to share a little bit about what we do in SP Digital and some of the things that we have been doing since the COVID-19 outbreak came about, and also describe about our vision empowering sustainability with energy tech. So SP Digital is the digital arm, the digital business arm of SP Group. And for those who are not in Singapore and those who are not quite sure what SP Group is, SP stands for Singapore Power. We are the main transmission and distribution utility in Singapore. And basically anyone who lives in Singapore, you probably receive a bill from SP at some point in time if you will live in any properties. So SP Digital, we were set up about 4 years ago because of the various changes that's happening in the industry. And we want to see how we can use technology to drive some of the changes moving ahead. So as you can see, the vision for SP Digital is really all about sustainability. And we want to use technology, what we call energy tech, to drive this sustainability. So I'll not talk more about the organization. I'll just dive straight into what we do because I do have quite a bit to share. So let's talk a little bit about the consumer, right? So for those of you who are in Singapore, you might have seen this. And for those of you who haven't seen this, then I'll encourage you to download our app. Basically, the SP Utilities app, we use this app as our main point in interacting and basically engaging with our customers, both the residential as well as the commercial customers. And we have been running this since 2017, and it has a lot of utilities, as the name suggests, capabilities like tracking your electricity, water, and gas. And if you have a smart meter at home, we'll be able to see half-hourly data as well with this utility app. You can pay bills with all major credit cards, and even with loyalty points within some of the banks as well, and various other capabilities, which I think it's probably quite common, but something that's more I think unique to SP Utilities app is our ability to also enable electric vehicle charging. So SP Group today runs one of the largest EV charging networks in Singapore, and we also run the largest fast charging EV network in the whole of Singapore. And all of this charging is enabled through the SP Utility app, where you can locate, reserve the charging stations, and even pay for the charging itself. The whole setup, both from front to all the way back, is powered by SP Digital and the team that we have built in Singapore. The open electricity market is an effort that we have been supporting for the past couple of years, where now you can discover all the plans that are in the market that suits your needs best. It doesn't necessarily need to be SP Group. In fact, the plans here do not include anything in SP Group, but we are powering the market. Green Up is a initiative for sustainability that we use to teach responsible energy use through gamification. We also encourage our users to understand their energy usage using the Electricity Pledge Challenge, where you can sort of challenge yourself to see how much you can meet certain sustainable energy use goals. And when you achieve those goals, then we will reward you with certain points, what we call leaves. And with those leaves, then you can exchange them for rewards through Capital Star and through other means as well. The current setup, there are already certain merchants which are on board with us, but there'll be a lot more that's rolling out in the next coming months as well. And we also try to encourage you to understand a little bit more about your carbon footprint on a personal level and also on a household level. So we built this carbon footprint tracker within the app. It is also available on the website, so you can actually try it out without even using the app. And this will help you to understand a little bit about your impact on the earth if you live in Singapore. Talking a little bit about some of the further things that we're doing, and we are going to use this app as well to control centralized cooling in a smart town that's going to be ready in the next few years, specifically the Tengah Energy Town or Tengah Smart Town that's going to be coming up in 23-24. And that will have centralized cooling that's powered by SP, and the controls as well as the understanding of how this thing works will be through the app. And this talks a little bit more about the Smart Town Tengah and more of the things that we are going to engage with our consumers through it. Finally, if you understand a little bit about renewable energy certificates, this is something that is it's practiced today in the industry, mostly by commercial buildings who would like to purchase the certificates to cover their usage in terms of the energy usage within buildings and so on. And a lot of these are used by enterprises to show their support for the green movement. But now we are enabling this down to the consumer level, meaning as a user, as an individual residential user, you can also do this. Right? It is not a feature that's enabled today, but in the next couple of weeks, we'll be enabling this as well. So you can imagine that as a user who is at home every day now, with working from home and everything, then the app is one of the ways that we're encouraging people to really understand their usage and using data to be able to change their lifestyle to support a more sustainable future. So that's really more on an individual level, but we're also powering things on a larger scale through commercial buildings. So what we have done within SP Digital is to really think about how we can change the way that buildings manage their energy. And we look at it from multiple levels. So the first level is on monitoring, to understand, to get the data from the actual equipment itself. So this will provide information for the users, the facility managers, and so on and so forth. But knowing is just one starting point. You need to be able to affect change. You need to be able to control. So that's the next level that we are talking about. Then after that, you want to be able to get insights and also to be able to recommend best course actions to be taken. Final decision here with intelligence, with the AI that's learning from all those collected data, then you want to enable somebody to make the changes. Ultimately, of course, we do want to take the human out of the equation, no matter how bad that sounds. But in reality, human beings would make more errors and would not be able to react fast enough. So we want to enable autonomy to automate the fast decision making, and to have a fast reaction time to make the necessary changes to actually drive the management of energy forward. So that's our overall vision. And to this point, we actually built a number of technologies. Like we have a IoT platform that's today, right now, deployed out to the production within the field in Singapore. And we have a number of components. This specifically is our product, the SP Universal Gateway. And we have a number of universal gateways that have already been deployed all over Singapore, controlling various devices, including things like solar panels, energy storage systems, in our power stations, and so on and so forth. And this talks a little bit about the actual units themselves and some of the partners that we work with. And of course, with this, then we are talking about how do we enable different types of markets, different kind of customers. So the first segment that we talk about are offices and malls, where we do want to use things like smart meters and infrastructure to enable the users to be able to have better information about their infrastructure, better information of how do they control and manage the buildings, the energy usage of the buildings, and have sustainability reporting, and also to be able to drive better user and occupant experience for the users. So some screenshots of what we do for both the facility managers and also for the tenants. And so that's for the tenants, but for the facility management, it is beyond just the tenants for the offices and the malls. You also have common areas, like, for example, the lifts, the escalators, the common corridors, the atriums, and so on and so forth, where we are enabling the facility management to better manage those common areas, but also to provide a means to showcase what we have done to building visitors. Like if you're a visitor to a mall, visitor to this office building, you want to be involved. You want to know how this building is doing in terms of managing the energy and managing the sustainability efforts and so on. So this is an example of what we have done. And some of the customers that we have engaged with, including Chang Airport Terminal 3. So let me continue with this. So beyond the offices and malls, then we're looking at managing solar and energy storage, where we have built a system to be able to manage the deployed solar panels as well as energy storage systems. In a product we call Aurora, where these are some of the screenshots of things that we have done. Some of the customers that we engage with, including ourselves, so we eat our own dog food. We have deployed tens of solar panel installations, as well as managing these various sites all over Singapore. So that's so much for the industrial and commercial in terms of the building level, in terms of the facility management. But we do want to care about the thermal comfort, because as you know, in Singapore and in many parts of the tropical region, thermal comfort is something that's really crucial. Very often we think it's okay, but once the heat comes up, a lot of productivity drops, because we can't hardly work if we are sweating all the time. So that becomes really key. And the usage of air conditioning is one of the largest power consumption in any building, in any office, in any facility. So we want to actually drive sustainability through better usage of the air conditioning. So that's some technologies that we're deploying to manage that. We want to use this to not only do it per building as managing the entire building, but also floor by floor. So we can enable tenants on an individual floor or individual units. And some of the other capabilities that we're doing for this. And in one case study, we have the One Marina Boulevard, which is a building at the Marina Bay area, where we have driven 35% savings of the energy. So that drives more sustainable use of air conditioning. And AI, I think that's a very famous topic, very popular topic. We deploy a lot of AI within what we do. And in particular for the industrial sector, we deployed something we call Energy Brain, which has these features, including profiling, forecasting, optimization, and monitoring. So some features of what we do, and some of the customers where we have helped to drive savings, like Samco Marine, which is a shipyard within Singapore, where we do peak shaving for the energy storage, using the energy storage to help to reduce contracted capacity. That's using AI-based anomaly detection to be able to help to understand better the condition of the solar panels that we deployed, because things break down over time. And if you have to monitor one solar panel, two power panel, that's probably okay. But if you have 5 kilometers of solar panels, that becomes a problem. So we use intelligent monitoring of solar PV to be able to help our users better manage their solar panels. And different operations internally for operating meters. Again, saving on operations costs, saving on better use of manpower, and so on and so forth. In terms of condition monitoring for our network, including things like partial discharge, gas network, and chillers, and so on and so forth. managing the operations and the gas network, managing the chillers, managing microgrids, which is a new solution usually deployed for things like a small business park or a small area. In this particular case, we are powering the SIT, which is a new university campus that's coming up at the Punggol, the Singapore Institute of Technology. And so finally, just a list of customers that we have served so far and we will be serving in the future. So I did a very quick run through of what we're doing. I hope that was not too quick, but I just wanted to give a flavor of what we are doing very quickly and how we use data to actually power a lot of these things to drive sustainability, which is really our vision moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheong, for sharing your inspiring vision. For viewers joining us live on Facebook, please share this stream with others. And on YouTube, hit subscribe to stay updated. How can governments manage all of this data effectively? What strategies and technologies should they turn to? For more on this, we hear from Henry Sowell, CIO of Government Solutions and Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Cloudera.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to join you all this morning, and thank you for all the wonderful panelists. It's been extremely interesting to hear your different use cases. As I work with government executives across the world, it is incredibly inspiring what you all are doing for missions around the world. It is a pleasure to work with the public sector. I have been, whether it's military, government, or other service for the last 20 years, been supporting missions. And it's always a privilege to talk about different use cases. In Cloudera, we are supporting innovation in the public sector through a number of different means, primarily through our software platform, and providing many of the use cases that were discussed today, and offering solutions on that front. I'll walk you through quickly as we prepare for the panel, just some of what that looks like in Cloudera's offering and what we bring to the table as an enterprise data cloud. And if you look at what does it mean to be an enterprise data cloud? And it means that we offer enterprise capabilities across in multiple different clouds and in your data center, and we collect data from the edge, bring it in, allow for real-time decisions, allow for storage of vast amounts of data, performing machine learning and analysis and insights, all in support of public sector missions. That's the primary capability of our enterprise data cloud. And if you think about it in three basic pieces, it's everything our platform supports, from edge to artificial intelligence, all through Cloudera's capabilities. And this is used for a variety of different missions across the public sector space. So when I work with the public sector, we're operating in multiple different missions, supporting over 40 different nations, public sector missions. And a lot of the things that were talked about today are areas that we're helping critically. And one of the interesting use cases that was talked about today was on the national statistics front. And when I look at this, it's such a hugely critical area. When you talk about the impact to policy change, it is driven largely by our collection of statistics data. How do we shape nations around the world? How do we make for change? And it's through this collection of a vast amount of data. We're supporting a number of major nations in support of the 2020 census across everything from the U.S. Census Bureau to several other nations. You also think about, from a huge amount of data that is being generated across the world, there's a cybersecurity component to that. And how do you collect as much data? So we're working with a number of different organizations to collect, in one use case, we have a defense example where there are over 300 bases around the world, and we're collecting data from across all networks and allowing profiling of that data. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in just a minute. And then everything from also when we look at the defense of a nation, how do you protect from border control to supporting your security forces? We're working on artificial intelligence in a number of areas on that front. And, as we talked about COVID-19 today, I wanted to talk about a particular use case in the public sector. When COVID-19 it came out and everything started getting restricted, one of the things that we wanted to do is like, all right, how do we support with the incredibly advanced platform that we have? How do we support our public sector mission owners in being successful on this front? So many of the things that you heard today about what are we doing in the healthcare space? We had just as an example, we had a university that was in charge of doing a significant amount of research that they were feeding into some of the treatments for COVID-19. And what they were doing is operating at a daily basis, collecting in new COVID patient records, data, doing machine learning at scale, operating this, but they were using it on legacy technology. So when you look at digital transformation, how do you do that in real time? Because we have people that are checking into hospitals on a regular basis. We have a huge amount of sensors that are connecting to individuals, and how do we make medical decisions on the fly to help treat and work with the COVID-19 mitigation. And so we actually helped innovate in several different university spaces to help them to make real-time decisions on the data, bringing machine learning to the edge so that they can make changes and information for patients and their treatments more effectively. So this has been pretty exciting. We show here on our slide a number of different other use cases that we're operating on, but it is really a transformation, right? So in the public sector space, you see different capabilities everywhere from those that are just starting out on their journey to those that are extremely innovative, and Cloudera is working across that spectrum. One of the areas that when we look at COVID-19 and the response that drove many to shelter into their homes and having to work more remotely, there was a major increase in cybersecurity attacks. And as individuals were taking their work home, and as a government, how do you respond to that? How do you help those that are in the commercial space? How do you help your government employees to operate effectively and safely? And this is something that we care about greatly. And how do you collect data at a massive scale? And how do you make informed decisions about that using machine learning and other tools? And Cloudera's data platform allows for those capabilities, allows you to collect data at scale, allows you to collect it at edge with all these new devices that are out there in a remote setting, able to collect them, able to make decisions, and then interdict activity before it's already a problem, right? And I think that's one of the big things that we saw from a cybersecurity perspective. That is, what we don't want is the average of waiting 7 months before you interdict something with cybersecurity. That isn't effective. And that is not, especially as our government workforce is shifting and we've had to do so much remotely. How do you protect very sensitive data and protect it before it's an issue? And so this is something that we've been working on from a machine learning and platform capability. And one of the things I want to close down on is conversations that I have on a regular basis with CIOs across the world in their government missions. And that is, as we pursue digital transformation, how are we doing that effectively? What strategies are we putting in place that allow us to operate and make effective decisions? And that starts with a sound data strategy. So a lot of things that come up start with a conversation around, how about what's your cloud strategy? Or what are you doing on XYZ? And it's a point specific project. And one of the things that we want to do is raise that up into saying, you need a data strategy. Where's your data located? How are you governing it? How are you securing it? And when you start answering those questions, then you can start coming up with a better answer to how do you effectively plan technology around that? And at Cloudera, we look at that data strategy, and we say that you have to have that full life cycle, right? You have to say, all right, where am I collecting that data? Where am I storing that? Am I able to store it in the data center on any cloud? Can I migrate it and move it? And beyond all of that, can I secure and govern it? And that's something that's core to Cloudera's mission and how we support public sector missions. And so really excited about all the speakers today and what you all are doing this week. It is hugely important. Very excited what you're doing for your missions. Thank you. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Henry, for those fantastic insights. And now I'm excited to move forward to our panel discussion. Before we start, if there are any questions from the audience, please type them in from Facebook or YouTube and let us know who you'd like to direct the question to. If I could start with you, Sheong, IHiS has moved really very quickly in responding to COVID-19. What were some of the fundamentals that were important in that?
Sure. I mean, I can probably break it down into 3 areas. One's really the people side. The ability to mobilize both the clinical resources, operational people, tech, health tech, IT people at short notice to come down, to react and respond to the crisis. I think that's critical. And having those capabilities, those in-house ability to build and modify systems are critical enablers from what we're seeing so far. The second area is really about the process of how we go about making the response to the crisis, right? So we tend to look at it from a OODA loop approach, OODA, looking at incrementally observing on the ground, working with the operational people on the ground, identifying the needs on the ground, day in, day out, orientating ourselves, trying to contextualize some of the existing system we have on the ground in the context of how we modify them in response to the COVID situation as it evolves, and then deciding very quickly in terms of what we need to do and really act upon it, and then having that loop to continue to learn, continue to evolve incrementally. Right. Last but not least, it's really about the ability to harness some of the existing platforms that we have. We took a very simple lift, drop, and evolve approach, right? So we took some of the existing systems that we have, deploy them into the CAS facilities, train the people to use those systems, and then incrementally evolve that in an agile way to support the evolving needs on the ground. So I think those are the few key fundamentals. Over to you.
Gemma, you talked about New Zealand moving to more experimental approaches in data and response to COVID-19. How can other countries do that, and what can they learn from New Zealand?
Thank you very much, Medha. So we're seeing across the region a lot of experimentation. So what the statistical community clearly has an important role to provide trusted, authoritative national statistics, as we just heard from Cloudera. So population estimates, inflation estimates, GDP. But there's another part of our business where we can provide statistics, official statistics, that meet a different audience and meet a different need. And so these experimental statistics, are widely used across the statistical community, and they're just badged differently. So in the case of New Zealand, I shared with you that the data portal, and you saw on the web page that it had a disclaimer in there that said, these statistics apply a different quality standard to our normal statistics. This is seen across the region, and we all have these tools available to us to put out the most most needed, most relevant, most authoritative statistics at the time. So in the statistical community, as with every community, COVID-19 has actually given us opportunity to experiment and to innovate and be a little bit more responsive and agile to the needs of our different users. So New Zealand I shared with you, Indonesia I shared with you, but actually across the region we're seeing a lot of innovation and a lot of experimentation. And the official stats community really taking their mission of trying to provide responsive, relevant statistics to the public sector and to the public. They're really rising to that challenge, and so I see a lot of innovation, a lot of experimentation in the statistics community across the region.
Fantastic. And Sheong, you talked about how SB Digital is using AI to promote sustainability. From your experience, how can organizations spot new patterns in the information and data that they're gathering and adapt very quickly to that? Sorry, Sheong, you're on mute, I think.
Oh, my bad. So that is actually the hardest problem. Really, the technology part of things usually are not the hardest part of the problem. In such situations, the hardest part of the problem tends to be the use cases, right? How do you actually take the data to do something? It's not as hard as figuring out what you want to actually do. What do you want to actually achieve? So I think that basically is the problem in most industries, as I discover in the energy industry, in the power industry, because obviously the power industry has been running for decades, right? For 100 years. And I mean, there are certain ways of doing things already. How do you change that? How do you actually transform to do things better? But what is better? Because the current people who are doing things wouldn't tell you that what they have been doing all the while, things they're doing all the while is wrong. And people outside the industry hardly know what's happening in there as well. So you do really need somebody to come in and really look at things that's been happening, and look at things that are changing, and really figure out what the use cases are and what kind of opportunities are there available to make the change. So I think if you look at the larger, the overall view of everything, and the larger picture, so to speak, then you really need to look at what is the problem. And figuring that out is, I think, the biggest hurdle to cross. And then once that is done, then figuring out the technological parts of it and putting the blocks in place to deliver the solution, that will come a lot easier. So I don't know whether it helps in terms of giving the answer, but that is what it is in the industry.
Of course, thank you. And Henry, what are some of the big trends you foresee as a result of COVID-19?
Well, I think you just heard some really good building blocks, right? One, I think this is driving innovation. I think we are seeing in this period, right? We can talk about a lot of the bad things. We all are aware of them, right? We've seen the danger in the world. We've seen how serious this is. But, you know, if you look on the good side, right, we have had a generational change in technology in this moment, right? Where we talk about, you know, great-grandparents are using Zoom and technology that they wouldn't before. We're seeing that in our workforce too, right? So we're seeing people that are looking at technology in new ways. That is going to drive innovation. Some of it is a mission. Our missions are going to force that, right? So Gemma talked about, you know, statistics had to change. What do you do when you have to collect statistics in a new way, right? You are forced to do things in a more electronic means, right? Versus paper. It changes organization. I think we're going to see that. And I think that, you know, like Sal said, when we talk about the cultural shifts that you're going to have to do to say, okay, how do we make machine learning effective to my specific mission? We talk to executives all the time where it says that I need people to step out of the comfort zone and say, okay, if I said I had to solve this very difficult problem, whether it was counterterrorism, whether it was a health pandemic, whether it was, you know, whatever it was, I need to think differently. And that's a cultural change. And I think those things are going to be, you know, a part of our organizations that we're going to have to continue to drive those. And I think that's some of the things that we're going to see coming out of COVID-19.
Absolutely. And Gemma, how is UNFCAP using data to target its programs and achieve impact in the work that it does?
Yeah, sure. Look, our main job here in my division around statistics is actually working with the 58 countries in our region and providing sort of support and mechanisms where countries can get together and learn from one another, share their experiences. So so the data we use in a way is both quantitative and qualitative, but at the moment it's very qualitative. You know, we're getting a lot of requests for assistance. How do I change my survey operations? How do I deal with the impact of not being able to go out into the field to collect my data and so on? So we're actually responding quite rapidly, if you like, to this. For instance, with the lockdown, most of our operations, most of our support had to become virtual, just like we are here today. And we introduced this new series called the Stats Cafe series that started out as a weekly webinar, if you like, where we were responding to specific requests for help on how do we deal with COVID on our census, on our household surveys, and so on. Anyway, this cafe series continues to go weekly. And for some of our cafes, we get 400 or 500 people from across the region, right all the way from the Pacific, all the way over to Central Asia. So we're using our data, if you like, to reach out to our audience, to share with them experiences like we've shared today in this GovInsider event, because everyone likes to learn from one another. So to me, this is how we have impact, by providing opportunities where others can learn from one another and strengthen that network that we have, not only as official statistics community, but with the broader community like we have here today, with the technology community, with actually the broad data community, just not the statistical. Thanks, Medha.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gemma. Sheong, if I could just go back to you, you talked about the new normal of remote healthcare and perhaps even another pandemic. How is IHiS preparing for this?
It's difficult, right? To be honest, right? And the only way I think we can be prepared and get ready is really to always constantly look at harnessing data for actionable insight, always tapped in, collecting data, sensing, doing surveillance, making sure that we can anticipate the need before it happens. All right, and both business and IT needs to speak the same language using a data-driven approach. All right, to look at this and industrialize the way we do things, change the way we do things by really relearning this OODA loop that I talked about, right? Which is we all observe together, we orientate ourselves to make sure that we contextualize what we are seeing, sieving out the noises versus from the real needs on the ground, and then improving along the way, designing systems that's relevant on the ground, but understanding that there is not the end of that release. It's about understanding it, iterating through the solution, all right, making sure that the next changes will go in to improve that. If it doesn't work, we try it again, and that iterative loop to improve the way we serve our customers, our patients, and our consumers. Yeah, thanks.
Henry, could you tell us about how cloud is changing the way in which governments access and use data?
Absolutely. So, if you relate it back to this recent pandemic, and I talked about the remote workforce. There was a flurry of activity that said, "Hey, we need to use some new vendor. That vendor only operates on Microsoft Azure. This one operates on AWS." And there was a scramble across public sector customers to say, like, "Okay, hey, we don't have a presence on Azure, or we don't have a presence on this cloud," and so they had to move very, very quickly. So it really brought to a head do you have a multi-cloud strategy? Do you have the capability and skill sets that allow you to operate not only on-premise, which a lot of government customers still are, but also to be able to leverage the benefits that you get from a cloud experience? And a lot of things are driving those pieces. The need for rapid innovation, quick testing, scalability, things that the cloud allows for quick innovation and capability. And then mixing into that same piece, the added piece where you have to have security, governance, flexibility, and adapt to new situations like what we found with COVID-19.
Fantastic, thank you. Sheong, what technologies are you excited about for the future? Do you think that things like augmented reality and virtual reality can change public services?
I do. I think those are things that definitely will be changing how people perceive the world. Definitely, these two items. But personally, I think the use of data and the use of AI will and machine learning. Basically, these are the new drivers, right? So from everything that we do in terms of software development to how software is going to change the things that we do. I think AI and ML will basically change all of these things, and not only the ones that are more immediate. So what I would call the first order of things, right? So when I first so let me just give an example. What I would call the first order for AI is really things like computer vision, right? So you look at computer vision, that's really on a machine learning algorithm, and what you will use machine learning. What we use computer vision for is really things like facial recognition, maybe to identify the handwriting and so on and so forth. So that's the first order. But the second order would come in things like autonomous driving, right? Robotics. And that has an element where it requires computer vision, but that has a completely different direction where it's heading. And the things that you can drive with autonomous driving, with robotics, with robots, and so on, which requires computer vision, the kind of things that you can actually achieve with that is totally different from what you would see just purely on computer vision alone. And I think these are the things that we can't envision today. And but these are the things would definitely be the things that would change the world in the future. And it's something that I'm exploring tremendously in the energy industry, where, if you talk about energy, a lot of people would say first thing, hey, predictive maintenance, right? So you detect issues with the equipment, and then you send people down to fix it, save tons of money from everybody. So let's do that. But I think that's really the low-hanging fruit, and that's really the first order. The second order, how do you actually do a lot more with these technologies? That's what I'm aiming for, and that's what I think we should all be aiming for, because those are the things that will literally change the world.
Thank you, Sheong. I know that Gemma has had to hop off for her next appointment, but just a final question for everyone here. William Gibson famously said that the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. What are some of the glimpses of the future? Sheong, let me start with you.
I think I briefly shared in my presentation, but the future will be a convergence of both AI into our clinical workflow, leveraging on Internet of Things that is in the patient's home, measuring their vitals, their movement, their behavior, combining that with historical medical record and data to better predict and anticipate the needs of those individuals. And then hopefully through the prevalence of telehealth and robotics that can be deployed both in the hospitals and at home, that facilitates and actuates some of these actions that we need to intervene to care for the individuals at home. So I think that is a very likely future, and I think we need to get ready for that foreseeable future. Thanks.
Henry?
I love that answer. I think what both Chee and Sowell said, it is huge when you look at what machine learning and AI can do for our future. And I think it is some of those low-hanging fruit, but I think there are things that we're going to be able to do that will be, especially in the near term, is going to be pushing machine learning and AI to the edge. That it's not going to just be in your data center that's going to be processed every 12 hours, right? These are going to be decisions for a patient that are going to happen, like she said, in the home. That they're going to be real-time alerts. That they're going to be something where a condition is raised that says, "Hey, in this building, you have an energy issue, and if we change these percentage of pieces, we can actually make it much more efficient." Those are going to be things that are going to be coming up in the near-term future, and I think they're huge for us. I think a lot of it comes down to data collection, real-time processing with IoT, and machine learning combining together to bring the future here.
Any final thoughts, Sheong?
Yeah, so I totally subscribe to what you said just now, that the future is here. And I believe the technologies that required are already available today. So very much like AI and ML have been around for like many, many years, right? Decades. It's just not been used properly. So I believe the technologies that we are looking at to change the world tomorrow, it's already here. But really, it's up to us to discover this usage of it, right? I don't think we have really figured out the use cases. I mean, I go back to what I said earlier on. We haven't really figured out the use cases. We haven't really figured out what we want to do. Obviously, some of these things that we're doing today, revolutionary, life-changing, and so on and so forth. But I don't think we have reached that age. We have really pushed the boundary and make that leap towards things that are really, really world-changing. Like, no doubt we have for some of these things, and I believe for them, like autonomous driving, for robotics and so on, some of these things are already world-changing. But these are only the start, I believe, right? Because these technologies have not, the fundamental algorithms, the fundamental technologies have been around for a long time, and we all know about it. It's we studied when we were in university, and obviously they were taught by professors who have already known about this for a long time. But the use cases of this, I would say the engineering part of it, the figuring out what we're going to do with it, and this drives back down to digital transformation, right? So when I first joined SP, and they were telling me, hey, Sheong, help me to figure out digital transformation. It's like, what is digital transformation? I don't understand what you're trying to do. Like, it's because the industry itself have not actually moved out of where they were, right? Whereas many different parts of the other industries have done that, and for them to move out of that area where they are in today is digital transformation. That is the transformation, and I think for every industry there is such a transformation. It just needs people to actively go in and figure it out. And I mean, I say just, but it's actually obviously not just. You really need a lot of effort to do this and to move people out and to achieve these things. So I believe the future is really bright. And for technologists like myself, I really look forward to it every day to see some of these really life-changing things that are happening.
Thank you. That's a wrap for this session. Thank you, Sheong, Gemma, Sheong, and Henry for a hugely insightful conversation this morning. We have 2 other sessions coming up today. At 4 p.m., we'll discuss stability in an uncertain world with ITU and France's digital ambassador. And at 5 p.m., we'll explore cyber futures with speakers from Japan, Red Cross, and Citi. Stay tuned on GovInsider's Facebook and YouTube. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.